On a quiet street in Cleveland, Ohio, life seemed ordinary. Children rode their bikes, neighbors exchanged greetings, families cooked dinner behind glowing windows. But just a few doors down, behind one locked front door, a nightmare was unfolding in silence. 3 young women, each with dreams, families, and lives ahead of them, were stolen from the world. Amanda Berry was only 16, saving money at her Burger King job, excited for her birthday. Gina DeJesus was just 14, walking home from school laughing with friends. Michelle Knight was 21, determined to fight for custody of her son. They should have been safe. But instead they vanished without a trace. For their families, the days stretched into weeks, weeks into years. Searching, begging for answers, never knowing they were so painfully close. Inside that house their lives were stripped away. Windows boarded, doors locked, freedom gone. They were starved, beaten, and silenced. Yet through the darkness their spirits refused to break. For more than a decade they were hidden in plain sight. Their suffering invisible, their cries unheard. Until one desperate scream shattered the silence and exposed one of the most shocking crimes in American history. This is not just the story of Ariel Castro. This is the story of Amanda, Gina, and Michelle, 3 women who endured the unendurable and survived. It started so quietly no one realized what was happening. A normal day. A normal walk home. And then silence. August 23, 2002. Michelle Knight left her cousin's house in Cleveland, clutching directions to a courthouse. At just 21 she was a young mother, desperate to regain custody of her little boy. She never showed up to her hearing. To authorities, Michelle's case barely raised alarms. She was classified as an adult who might have left on her own. Even her own family believed she had drifted away. Michelle's disappearance slipped through the cracks, unnoticed, uninvestigated, forgotten by many. But Michelle hadn't left. She was already trapped inside the house on Seymour Avenue, the first victim of a nightmare no one yet knew existed. Months passed. And then, another girl was taken. April 21, 2003. Amanda Berry, just 16 years old, was working her final shift at Burger King before her 17th birthday. That evening she called her sister around 7:30 p.m. Her voice was calm, almost cheerful. She said she had gotten a ride home and would be there soon. But Amanda never walked through her front door. Her mother, Luana, searched the streets, refusing to believe her daughter would run away. This was her birthday week. Amanda had plans, dreams, a future. When Amanda didn't come home, panic turned into dread. Her mother called the police, but hope was quickly replaced with silence. Posters went up, vigils were held, but the answers never came. Amanda was simply gone. The city of Cleveland felt the unease. And then in 2004, fear tightened its grip. April 2, 2004. Gina DeJesus, a 14-year-old girl with a bright smile, waved goodbye to her best friend after school. They had been laughing, making plans for a sleepover, the kind of carefree conversation only young teens have. Gina walked her usual route home. Just blocks from safety she vanished. Her father, Felix, refused to let her memory fade. He stood on corners with missing posters, he spoke to reporters through tears, he begged the city for answers. But like Michelle, like Amanda, Gina had been swallowed by the same darkness. 3 young women. 3 different lives. All gone. Each disappearance brushed off in some way. Michelle treated as a runaway, Amanda labeled uncertain, Gina considered another tragic case. No one connected the dots. No one saw the pattern. But they were all still there. Hidden in plain sight. Just a few blocks away, inside an ordinary-looking house with white siding and boarded-up windows, they were living through a nightmare no one could hear. And the worst part? Their families walked those same streets. They drove past that very house. They cried out for their daughters, never knowing the answers were right there behind locked doors. 3 vanishings. 3 families torn apart. And for over a decade, the city of Cleveland would live with an invisible horror lurking among them. But what exactly happened inside that house on Seymour Avenue? And how did these women endure more than 10 years of silence, starvation, and suffering without anyone realizing the truth? Asterisk. 2207 Seymour Avenue. From the outside, it looked like any other home in a quiet Cleveland neighborhood. 2 stories, white siding, and neatly trimmed lawn. Neighbors walked past every day, children played in the yard, and life went on around it without pause. Nothing about it screamed danger. Nothing hinted at the horrors hiding behind its walls. Inside, however, the house told a very different story. Ariel Castro had transformed it into a fortress of control and cruelty. Windows were boarded from the inside with thick wood, shutting out sunlight and leaving the rooms in permanent darkness. Doors were reinforced, locked and chained. Every corner, every hallway, was meticulously arranged to keep his victims trapped and disoriented. The basement, where much of the abuse occurred, was a chamber of fear. Damp, dimly lit and cold, it became both a prison and a tool of psychological torment. Here Castro would exercise complete control. Meals were rationed, privileges granted or denied, and hope manipulated like a cruel game. The bedrooms upstairs were no refuge. Each woman was locked inside her own room, cut off from the others, forced to endure silence, isolation and fear. The small bathroom they were allowed to use was shared, the conditions degrading, humiliating and designed to strip away dignity. Plastic buckets served as toilets, emptied only when the stench became unbearable. Castro even controlled the sounds. Music blared to mask screams, the clatter of objects hidden as evidence, and every knock or cry stifled before it could alert the outside world. He had perfected the art of hiding evil behind a mask of normalcy, fooling neighbors, friends, and even the families of his victims. It was a house that appeared ordinary, but inside it was a tomb. Each wall, each floorboard, each locked door became a witness to suffering. A place where years would pass with no sunlight, no freedom, and no relief. A place where 3 young women would live a nightmare that most could not even imagine, all while the world around them carried on unaware. Behind the doors of 2207 Seymour Avenue, the world went silent. From the outside it looked like any other home in Cleveland. But inside it was a prison. Michelle Knight was the first to enter that nightmare. The day she walked into Ariel Castro's house in 2002, her life was torn apart. He tied her, chained her and left her in a dark, locked room. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. She quickly realized she wasn't going home. When Amanda Berry was taken in 2003, Michelle heard her voice through the walls. A second victim. Second life stolen. Amanda was just 16, barely out of childhood, yet she was forced into a reality no one could imagine. Soon after, Gina DeJesus joined them. 3 women, strangers once, now bound by the same nightmare. Inside that house, time no longer existed. Windows were covered. Doors were bolted shut with heavy chains. Every room was a cage. Their meals were scraps, sometimes only once a day. When Castro was angry, he withheld food altogether. After more than a decade in darkness, every day had been a lesson in fear. Amanda Berry knew the punishments for defiance, the terror that awaited if she dared try to escape. Yet by May 6, 2013, something shifted. A small chance, barely noticeable, revealed itself. The inner door, the barrier that had kept her, Michelle and Gina isolated from the world, wasn't properly locked. Amanda froze. Her heart pounded. She had been trained to obey, conditioned to fear, to doubt herself. Could she risk it? Could she trust the door wouldn't close behind her forever? She glanced at her 6-year-old daughter, the tiny light in her world of darkness. This child had grown up in a basement, never feeling grass beneath her feet, never seeing sunlight as it was meant to be seen. This was their moment. Cautiously, Amanda nudged the door. A soft click echoed like a shout in her ears. She whispered to Michelle, who had endured more than anyone could imagine, and to Gina, still fragile but unbroken. They exchanged a look that said everything, now or never. The outer storm door was still bolted shut. Through the thin screen, Amanda could see movement, neighbors going about their day, the sunlight she hadn't seen in years. She screamed. Not a cry of defeat, but a battle cry, raw and desperate. That scream carried beyond the house, reaching Angel Corderero first, a neighbor who tried to understand the commotion but couldn't communicate. Then Charles Ramsey arrived, an ordinary man who would become an extraordinary hero. Without hesitation, he rushed to the house, helping Amanda kick out the bottom panel of the storm door. Step by step, they emerged into sunlight so bright it almost blinded them. Amanda, clutching her daughter, led Michelle and Gina out of the shadows that had defined their lives for more than 10 years. "Call 911, Amanda shouted, her voice carrying both relief and urgency. The operator listened, disbelief and awe mixing in the silence that followed. "I'm Amanda Berry." I've been kidnapped. There are others in the house, Michelle Knight and Gina DeJesus. Within minutes, police officers Michael Tracy, Barbara Johnson and Anthony Espada arrived at 2207 Seymour Avenue, guns drawn, unsure what horrors awaited them behind the doors. Inside they found Michelle appearing both fragile and fierce, repeating over and over, "You saved me. You saved me." And then Gina, emerging from another room, blinking at a world she hadn't seen as a teenager. 3 women, free at last, blinking in the sunlight they had almost forgotten. A decade of darkness, fear and cruelty ended in the courage of one mother fighting for her child, one scream piercing through years of silence, and one neighbor willing to help a stranger into freedom. And just like that, the nightmare of 2207 Seymour Avenue was exposed to the world. But the story of their survival had only just begun. The sunlight that flooded Amanda, Michelle and Gina as they emerged from the house was more than just a physical relief. It was the first taste of freedom in over a decade. The city of Cleveland, and indeed the world, would soon realize the unimaginable scale of what had been hidden right in plain sight. Police arrived at 2207 Seymour Avenue, entering the house for the first time in years. What they found shocked even the most seasoned officers. Darkened rooms, boarded windows, plastic buckets for toilets, and evidence of systematic, prolonged abuse. Diaries, notes, and photographs detailed a carefully maintained reign of terror. Ariel Castro, the man who had posed as a friendly neighbor and a trusted friend to families, had constructed a prison within a home. Castro was arrested later that day in a McDonald's parking lot. The man who had taken 3 young women and their innocence for more than a decade was finally in custody. Authorities were stunned by the 977 counts he would eventually face, including kidnapping, rape, and aggravated murder for forcing miscarriages. It was one of the most grotesque crime sprees in American history, hidden just blocks away from everyday life. In the days that followed, the 3 women were taken to Metra Health Medical Center. Doctors and counselors began the painstaking process of healing their broken bodies and fractured minds. Michelle Knight, who had endured the most severe physical abuse, would require facial reconstruction surgery. Amanda Berry clung to her daughter, the small child who had grown up in captivity, a living reminder of resilience amidst horror. Gina DeJesus returned to a family who had never stopped believing she would come home, her childhood reclaimed, step by step under careful guidance and care. As Castro awaited trial, the details of his crimes continued to stun the world. He had attended vigils for the missing women, comforted their families and appeared as a concerned neighbor, all while hiding the women in his basement. His own son, Anthony, a journalism student, had unknowingly interviewed one of the victims' mothers for a news article, unaware that the monster behind it all was his father. July 26, 2013. Castro pleaded guilty to 937 charges in a plea deal that spared the victims from reliving their trauma in court. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 1,000 years without parole. His delusional defense, claiming the sexual acts were consensual, revealed the depth of his psychological distortion. But his death 1 month later, found hanging in his prison cell, denied the world the closure of seeing him serve decades behind bars. The house at 2207 Seymour Avenue was demolished on August 7, 2013. Michelle Knight, surrounded by the community, released yellow balloons representing missing children everywhere, a symbolic end to years of darkness. Yet as the women began to rebuild, the layers of trauma, and the questions about the full scope of Castro's depravity, were far from over. Even within his own family, horrors emerged. Castro's daughter, Emily, would later face life imprisonment for the murder of her own child, while other relatives faced charges for childhood sexual abuse. The legacy of violence and cruelty, it seemed, had spread further than anyone could have imagined. And while the world celebrated the escape of Amanda, Gina, and Michelle, the real work of healing, physically, emotionally, and psychologically, was only beginning. The women faced a daunting path, confronting the nightmares of the past, reclaiming stolen years, and finding a way to live in a world that had kept them captive in more ways than one. But even as they took their first tentative steps toward freedom, the story was far from complete, because surviving captivity is only the first step. What comes next is the fight to reclaim identity, to heal invisible scars, and to ensure that the darkness of their past never defines their future. Today the story of Amanda Berry, Michelle Knight and Gina DeJesus stands as one of survival, courage and the unbreakable human spirit. The house at 2207 Seymour Avenue, once a prison of unimaginable cruelty, is gone, demolished in 2013. In its place, a garden now blooms, a living symbol of renewal, hope and life triumphing over darkness. Michelle Knight, once a 21-year-old fighting for custody of her son, rebuilt herself from the ground up. She underwent facial reconstruction to heal the physical scars, sought therapy for her trauma, and legally changed her name to reclaim her identity. Tattoos became symbols of control over her own body, and she turned her experiences into advocacy, sharing her story to prevent others from suffering similar fates. Though she had lost years with her son Joey, she chose to wait until he was older to reconnect, honoring his life and choices while quietly mending her own heart. Amanda Berry, who gave birth to her daughter in captivity, devoted herself to giving her child the childhood she had been denied. She completed her high school education and dedicated her life to helping families find missing loved ones, transforming her pain into purpose. Her courage and devotion became a beacon of hope for other survivors of abduction and abuse. Gina DeJesus returned to a family who never stopped believing in her, her childhood room preserved as a testament to their hope. She finished school, volunteered to support families of missing children, and helped others navigate the emotional aftermath of trauma, proving that survival can lead to strength, not just endurance. Together, the three women received overwhelming support from the global community. Over $1 million in donations were given to help them rebuild, a reminder that even amidst the darkest horrors, humanity can shine brightly. Yet the story's shadow extends further. Ariel Castro's own family was deeply affected by his crimes. His daughter, Emily, later received a life sentence for slicing her own child's throat, and other family members were charged with childhood sexual abuse. The echoes of Castro's violence reached beyond the walls of 2207 Seymour Avenue, a chilling reminder of how evil can ripple through families. But the true legacy is not in the darkness that once held them captive. It is in the lives these women have reclaimed. They have transformed suffering into strength, fear into advocacy, and despair into hope. Their story is proof that even in the bleakest, most hopeless moments, resilience endures. As the sun rises over Cleveland, over gardens that now grow where chains once held them, the message is clear. Freedom can be regained, lives can be rebuilt, and courage can inspire generations. Amanda, Michelle, and Gina remind us that survival is only the beginning. The real victory lies in reclaiming life, one step, one day, one choice at a time. Their nightmare lasted 3,593 days. But their freedom, their courage, and their story will last forever. And as the world continues to learn from their experience, one question remains, echoing in the hearts of anyone who hears their tale. How many more survivors are still waiting silently behind doors that seem ordinary? The story of Amanda Berry, Michelle Knight, and Gina DeJesus is more than a tale of survival. It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit, the power of hope, and the courage it takes to reclaim life after unimaginable trauma. These women endured what most of us cannot imagine, yet they chose to rise, to fight, and to transform their pain into purpose. And now their journey continues, not just in their own lives but in the lives of those they inspire every day. They remind us that even in our darkest moments, even when the world seems silent, there is a way forward. That way is hope, resilience, and the refusal to be defined by the cruelty of others. But their story also raises questions that reach far beyond Cleveland. How many others remain trapped behind doors we would never suspect? How can communities stay vigilant to protect the vulnerable? And what can we, as individuals, do to ensure no one suffers in silence? If this story moved you, shocked you, or made you reflect, take a moment to honor the strength of these women. Share this video to spread awareness. Comment below, what part of their story touched you most or gave you hope? Your voice helps keep their courage alive and reminds the world that surviving isn't enough. Thriving is the ultimate triumph. And finally, never forget, light can always find its way into the darkest places. The women of Seymour Avenue endured years of unimaginable suffering, yet they walked into freedom, into sunlight, and into a life they now control. Their legacy is a challenge to all of us, to fight for hope, to fight for justice, and to never let cruelty define the story of our lives. If you want more stories that reveal the hidden darkness in everyday places and celebrate the courage of those who survive, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because these untold stories deserve to be heard, and their lessons deserve to live on.